Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Thank you everyone for joining us wherever on earth you may be, and welcome to our KNIME Hungry Lion webinar about data science. More specifically, we'll discuss today how Hungry Lion upskilled in just 6 months, or as I like to say, how to make chicken taste better with data. So, as a quick intro, I'm Nick. I'm a customer success manager on our customer care team here in Berlin. My role is simply to help customers succeed, meaning that I provide them with resources, advice, and assets that enable them to do so. Next, we'll have Jonathan from Hungry Lion join us on the stage to talk about how he's upskilled his data science team in less than 6 months. And finally, we'll end with a Q&A round with Jonathan, myself, Tatiana, and Hanan. And with that said, I would like to bring the others up onto the stage to give a quick introduction of themselves. So firstly, maybe let's start with Jonathan. Hi, Jonathan.
Hi. How's it going, Nick?
Good.
So I'm Jonathan Symonds. I'm the head of insights at Hungry Lion, which is a nice way of naming our business intelligence team.
Thank you, Jonathan. And we also have Tatiana joining us. Tatiana, would you mind saying a few words?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Tatiana, and I work together with Nick in customer success. Today, I will be helping with a Q&A session at the end of the webinar. And if you have a question, you can post it on the right-hand side. There's a Q&A part, and we will happily address them at the end of the webinar. Actually, some of the questions might be addressed right in the chat, so keep an eye there.
Thank you so much, Tatiana. And we also have joining us behind the scenes, Hanan Salim. He's a solutions engineer from our partner team. He will be helping to answer more of the technical questions in the background. So without further ado, I would like to give a little intro into KNIME, really high-level overview as to why we exist and what we can do for you. So a recent article from McKinsey stated that in the workplace of the future, it will be imperative for companies to seek out new tech and use data to drive optimal results and make better decisions. So I think we all kind of have this in the back of our minds, but sort of the takeaway and why should I care is that also in the same article, they stated that companies that are data-driven outperform their competitors by up to 20%. And that's what we're here to talk about today. So in discussing the path toward digitalization with our current customers, we basically see two different paths toward digitalization. On the one side, we have centers of excellence or IT groups who are using a specific set of skills and certain tools, tools being Python, R, SQL, coding tools. And their goal is to actually create long-term data value. And they do that by standardizing, reusing, productionizing, and automating data science. On the other side of the coin, we have business and domain experts. You can think of someone in finance or marketing, for example. They have their own set of skills, and they're using a different set of tools, such as Excel, Power BI, Tableau, for example. Their job is really to create agile, time-to-value results and immediate results. However, we've learned from our customers that this does produce depreciating data value over time. And for example, some of our customers even have over 1 million spreadsheets, and they ask us, okay, how can we automate them and how can we make better sense of this data? So we like to think of KNIME as sort of the glue that goes between these two sides of data literacy to basically tie everything together onto one platform. So some of you have already seen our analytics platform. To give a brief synopsis, we'd like to think of it as a sort of a data sandbox where you can take multiple hundreds of data sources, such as files, docs, audio, images, databases, apps, cloud, SAP, APIs, all these different data sources, and bring them onto one platform using our nodes. The nodes are color-coded, so you can easily identify them. And essentially what we're doing with the data once it's on the platform is we're blending and transforming, we're modeling and visualizing, and then we're also able to deploy and manage those workflows and models. From there, we can also output the results of the platform into REST APIs, into Edge, into your own company's BI tools, or even output them into different reports via different docs and even integrated into emailing systems. So now that I've discussed the analytics platform, maybe it makes sense to talk a little bit about how data actually moves or joins a company, or where it actually originates from. So typically we see from our customers, and this might be similar to John's case as well, where we have multiple data scientists or data wranglers or data engineers. And essentially what they'll do is they'll form a team. So they have their first team, which is really trying to understand data and make sense of those insights. And then not long after, we find that perhaps the marketing, finance, other teams may actually need that value or find insights in that value. So what we do is, even though they have no ability to actually write code, they can still view the results or the reports of those workflows. And without long, the idea is that we're able to connect multiple departments, so we're all on the same level of data understanding. And I'm sure maybe John can also attest to this a bit, as it's how it's grown in his company. And at the end of the day, the actual goal is to have a fully data-driven company. And visually, this is what this could look like, for example, in Hungry Lion. And a little bit about the why that we introduced our commercial complementary platform alongside our free open source analytics platform. Basically, we've created a place where you can easily onboard, you can easily collaborate, you can easily deploy, and you can scale the platform as well. And alongside this, we do offer layers of support, what I like to call the 5 pillars of support. So we do have quite a large community of KNIME experts who are always answering questions on the KNIME forum. We offer a number of online, self-paced, and in-class learnings. So you can use the modules online to sort of DIY your way through, or you can also join a live class as well. We do offer books, cheat sheets, sample workflows to get started. From my own personal opinion, I think the pre-built nodes, components, and extensions are, from my perspective, quite useful, because you can literally drag and drop right from the community hub onto the analytics platform. And then we also have a number of user groups and data connects. For example, we have an internal audit community where we are discussing best practices related to this. And we have a data hop actually coming up in the US in a number of days now. So we do offer multiple layers of support in addition to the platform. So why did KNIME introduce the Business Hub? So I'm sure that many of you are familiar with our Community Hub, which is our online repository and platform for sharing of knowledge, sharing workflows, sharing nodes and components. The idea with the KNIME Business Hub is now we've allowed you to actually bring that inside your organization. So instead of searching the online web for all the workflows that all KNIMers have created, you can actually just search within your company or within your team. So it does create sort of a repository or a centralized community base for upskilling, onboarding, and it allows you to scale this out as well. So that's just a quick synopsis of our analytics platform and our Business Hub. To learn more about the Business Hub, feel free to reach out to one of our customer care representatives who can give a demo of your use case and even allow you to take it for a test drive. But without further ado, I will then hand it over to Jonathan to talk about how he's using KNIME to drive insights and hopefully make his life a little bit easier.
Thanks very much, Nick. So this is the story of how Hungry Lion used data science and KNIME specifically to develop our BI department into an efficient and highly adopted business management solution. We've now actively used data in making decisions for the last 3 years, and we really find that data is at the core of our decision-making experience. Gone are the days where we use gut feel to try and guess where we're going. We leverage everything off of the data, and we use KNIME simplicity to ensure that that data is able to be managed and onboarded and utilized quickly, efficiently, and we get our team members to actively contribute within months of starting. So just a little bit about who we are. We are Southern African QSR, which is quick service restaurant group. We sell fried chicken, burgers, wings, and fries. And we own the majority of our stores, with the exception, rather, of our Botswanan stores, which are currently being franchised. We're looking at expanding our footprint significantly, and we are currently sitting on just over 300 stores. And we will be doubling that footprint over the course of the next 3 years, with plans of getting to around 1,000 stores within the year 10 from now. Just in terms of what we do, we sell 4 million meals to over 2.6 million customers per month. So there's a huge love for fried chicken in Africa, as there is in the rest of the world. And yeah, we pride ourselves in delivering great quality products to our customers who are always hungry for more. So just a quick overview of where we started. Before I joined Hungry Lion, there was a very, very limited amount of data consumption in the business. A couple of execs had a few reports that they would access. Everything was decentralized. It was supplied by various vendors and service providers. And we were finding ourselves in a position where if you wanted information, we'd be reliant on third parties. We also completed a lot of our checklists on clipboards, on pen and paper insights, and obviously that comes with many complications. There was no real BI in place, bar a couple of reports that were built by third parties, and our reporting was predominantly Excel based, so it would be something that you'd download and then view. Our objective for where we wanted to go was quite ambitious. We wanted to create a exceptions-based outlook on our data, where operations teams could look at data from various sources in a single repository. And part of that plan was to host our data in our BI tool, which is Looker Studio. Looker Studio is a Google native product. We are a Google Workspace company, and proudly so. So we wanted to leverage off of the Google Workspace platform, and we wanted tools that were native to our experience. That consistency that we were searching for across reporting became all the more important for us when I noticed that there were very few people actually consuming data from our third parties, and when they did export or start looking into the reporting, it very often wasn't understood. So I wanted to be in a position where I had a centralized place and we'd have consistency over our reporting. Managing by exception would become critical for us, and the reason for that is we have many stores, over 300 now, and the ability to look through data quickly and easily without worrying about things that are running well and smoothly becomes a lot more critical with scale. Then we also needed to ensure that our data was fed through to our reports on a very consistent basis. We also wanted to manage our stores with fewer resources. With doubling our store count every 3 years, you need to be able to be efficient. You can't double, triple, and quadruple your head office team in that kind of space. Our new reality currently is that all teams read their reports and have their reports customized, and that relevance to their department really makes a big difference. We're also digitizing all of our business processes at scale, and our reports are now updated weekly, daily, and in some cases every hour. So that's a nice change from the historic situations that we had. Just in terms of where we started, coming back to the beginning, we had reporting that was very limited. It was decentralized. Managers had to log into multiple dashboards, as I alluded to earlier. And each supplier basically would give us, you know, a very vanilla look at what their data was. It would make sense for their business, but oftentimes, you know, using different jargon, there's a lot of complexity in terms of some of the way that data is gathered and rendered, and that would create confusion. So every time somebody would want to onboard, they'd need to look at a new report from a new service provider. It would be, you know, completely in a format that suits that vendor or that third party, rather than something that's bespoke and, you know, makes sense for Hungry Lion. So that adoption process, every time a new program was launched, was a bit laborious, and it was a bit of a lethargic process. Information didn't get consumed efficiently. Yeah, as I was saying earlier, our reporting was very limited. We would download reports that would be very static. Operational checklists were being completed on pen and paper. And that led to us only being able to review that data in stores. So there was no way to access that quantitative and sometimes very qualitative information that was rich and could add a lot of value to our business. Most of our information was accessed without BI. There were a few exceptions. There were one or two exec BI reports that were built by a consultancy firm. And again, they didn't really speak to our processes. So there was a low adoption rate with those tools. Almost everything being Excel-based put us in a position where, you know, we would want customization, but very few vendors are able to really tailor and manipulate their backend for a single customer. So the reporting landed up being pretty static, and you needed to put in quite a bit of effort just to get a little bit of insight out of them. Interpreting those reports took quite a bit of time. We also had to access our data through a BI tool. So we decided to go with Looker Studio. It used to be called Data Studio, and it being native to Google meant plugging into everything just made a lot of sense. I started building a couple of data reports based on CSV files, and without being able to elaborate too much, we had some restrictions in terms of the databases that I could build. I was also relatively new to data. I've got a strong operational background, and I've done some commercial analytics before, but launching BI definitely was not something that I'd done, but it was something that I was really, really looking forward to grabbing by the horns. A colleague recommended KNIME, and basically I looked it up. He gave me some information about how it was listed in the Magic Quadrant of the Gartner Matrix. I was extremely interested, and I was hooked almost instantly. Within a week or two of actually going through and downloading KNIME onto my desktop, I was able to build 3 ETL models. And those data sets that I built dramatically reduced the time that I was spending in Excel processing and, you know, manipulating data to make sense of it and to enrich it so that it made sense to our teams. I also found the KNIME Hub within a week or two of that, and I started on the online courses shortly after that. Having that large, extensive network of information at your fingertips when you do plug into KNIME is really a very, very beneficial way of manipulating, processing, and understanding your data. Having people real world with real use cases where, you know, they're posting on forums and, you know, super people that are out there really spending time helping random strangers. It's a really awesome community. So as I was starting to manipulate and process data, I started realizing that, you know, processing big data starts coming with a bit of complexity. So having ease of nodes like the ORC writers, you know, those are big tables and big data tools that really are inherently suited for those purposes. Being able to store your metadata and structure of your schemas in your files that you're writing over into your ingest processes really has a huge amount of value. You're not sitting there trying to process and figure out where this one integer value is coming from in a world of floats. So yeah, being able to be in a position where we could easily build these workflows, we were able to write our information into Google's cloud storage area and then move it into BigQuery. Google leverages off of BigQuery's tables and the speed of BigQuery for Looker Studio, and they plug into each other seamlessly. It's a really great solution from a BI perspective. So we now had a tool which we could save tens of thousands in terms of pipeline costs. We looked at externalizing a few pipelines and very quickly realized, we were being charged hundreds of thousands of rands, which equates to tens of thousands of euros. And that ability to build pipelines and manipulate our ETL process and having the power in our hands really gave us the flexibility where we could grow, change, and enrich the data how we saw fit. Then this is my wonderful team. They are absolutely a dream team. They make my life really simple. They are, from the top left, Nyakala Mofokeng. She's a senior MI analyst here at Hungry Lion. On the top right, we have Vian van Wyk. He's also a MI analyst here at Hungry Lion, senior. Then Nhlamula Mkoana on the bottom left. She heads up all of our more junior work, but she's really become a stalwart in the way we approach our business, and she really just is so reliable. We definitely could not do business without her. And then on the bottom right is our newest starter, Dylan Solms. He has a lot of machine learning experience, and we are starting to embark on data science at scale now using his amazing abilities. So being in a position where we started building these pipelines, and I started, putting myself in a position where I became my own worst enemy. I was processing huge amounts of data for the different BI pages that I was rendering on, and I quickly discovered that I just didn't have the capacity to sit there running pipelines. So we decided the obvious progression for us would be to move on to KNIME server. And that server adoption came at a critical time for me. We had over 40 pipelines which ran on a daily or weekly basis, and being able to move everything in the exact same structures, you just launch it onto the server version, and you then go and structure your scheduling based on whatever frequency you want. And there's yet to be a use case where I'm not able to launch a schedule that meets the requirements that I want. So it's super, super flexible. It also put me in a position where I could start, launching those pipelines and putting myself into a position where within a few weeks of adopting the server, I was completely free to start working on improving systems rather than just running them. I hired Nyakalo and Vian, and it was around the same time that we moved to the KNIME server, and we started to realize that that server upgrade was a seamless process. It was a perfect timing in terms of the team growing. And within weeks of them starting, we put them onto the training courses, and it was roughly about 2 months where they started delivering proper KNIME workflows that could actually contribute. And within 6 months, they were running at scale. They were super proficient at KNIME. We had a whole bunch of process logic in terms of the way we build our workflows, just some housekeeping things, so that we can be in a position where we're able to hand over those workflows seamlessly. We were also able to save a large amount of money on those pipelines, as I alluded to earlier. And that understanding of big data put us in a position where we could start learning tools like SQL and Python, being able to create actionable exceptions for our operations teams based on our data. And our data could also tell us where to look instead of trying to find those needles in the haystack. We were also in a position to start giving our teams the information how they wanted. We were freed up in terms of all of our time that we were spending on ETL. And that allowed us to start building bespoke dashboards for each of our departments within 2 years. We also decided to put ourselves into a position where we could start testing theories, where we could explore our data at length, and being able to iterate quickly through workflows where you go on one tangent and you start building your workflow in one direction and quickly realize, oh, hang on, there's something really interesting here. And you start building another section of your workflow in a completely different tangent, and you start building monster workflows, as are shown at the bottom of this slide. It really does lend itself very, very nicely to being able to explore your data and iterate and test concepts nicely. Consistency of reporting put us into a position where we started seeing really high levels of user adoption. I'd launched a BI tool from the sideline. I wasn't directly involved in building the tools, but I noticed very quickly in the previous business that I was in that it doesn't matter how awesome you think your BI solution is. If the intended user doesn't use it, you've lost the plot. Making things easy to understand and answering real-world problem statements is key to getting your users engaged with the tools that they are actually looking at. So we started managing our business by exception, and we had these automated feeds. And the impact of KNIME was that we were able to really enrich our reports, build pipelines that could tell meaningful stories with our data. And obviously, they can plug in to any types of data feeds. The rich amount of nodes that are accessible and available for download really put you in a position where there's no use case that's beyond your grasp with KNIME. It put us into a position where we definitely were able to manage more sites with fewer feet on the ground, and we were now really ready for doubling our footprint in the 3-year period. So we now have all our teams gaining access to their data in a method and style that's relevant to them in the same platform. Nobody's accessing data from third-party vendors anymore. So everything's nice and dynamic. It's able to be accessed. And that high level of understanding in the teams really leads them to positions where they can start asking really data intuitive questions of the information that's at their fingertips. That leads to further user adoption, and that reliance on data has really helped us leverage on the tools that we're using to cement in our BI strategy. We also now are moving into the digitalization of all of our checklists, and we no longer collect information on pen and paper at all. In fact, we've gone so far as going printerless in our business. We no longer sit with information unless it's on a digital device. And that's putting us in a position where we're gaining really rich sources of data, now moving into the millions and billions of rows. And we've got huge plans for being able to access that information long-term using data science. And we now do load the majority of the data that we consume on a daily basis, very seldomly on a weekly or monthly. And in many cases, we have information as fresh as 15 minutes. That ability to enrich and load our data in batches really puts us in a position where we can have proper data integrity. South Africa and Southern Africa does struggle from internet connectivity, reliability. So we have challenges with power, we've got challenges with internet, and those disruptions can oftentimes lead to data that is not as fresh as you'd like it to be. But the joy of KNIME is that if you just reconfigure your workflow, you realize, hey, hang on, we're having synchronicity challenges. You can just reconfigure things to pull data for a broader term. At this stage, we pull data for 45-day buckets, and that really allows us the flexibility of being in a position where we know that that data, if not completely fresh at the very beginning, by the time we hit 45 days, we have very, very few anomalies in our data. So the flexibility of KNIME has led us to being in a position where we can start looking at proof of concepts, where we can start iterating through our data very quickly. we've recently started moving into proof of concepts for temperature logging. Obviously, chicken is quite a sensitive product, and we use that in our manufacturing process in our stores to make our incredible product. And the ability to have validated temperature readings is quite critical to us. You know, historically, we had users capturing values on pen and paper, and you'd need a user to come into the business, go through piles of paper that invariably landed up being in a printer box and under a table somewhere, with a lot of grease stains and some chicken breading like splattered on the corner of it. We now started capturing our data in our digitalized tools, where we have our operational health and safety checks. But we realized that a validated approach is definitely the way to go. You've then reduced user error, and we're now currently exploring which service providers to go with and who to partner with. But using KNIME's flexibility of connecting to any type of data source, and being able to quickly build through a solution in terms of a data pipeline, has put us in a position where we're no longer doing POCs in an annual basis. We've now, in the last 5 months, gone through 5 different vendors, and we are able to render through that data very quickly and build lovely reports, as you see at the bottom here. Each one of these reports was built off of a different pipeline from a different service provider by a different member of my team. So we now have that flexibility of really starting to leverage off of our information and really build to the strengths of my team members. I'm getting a lot of insight in terms of how they think and where they are strong. So I can now start tailoring which solutions I want to solve and which questions I want to answer based on my different team members' strengths. So that power and flexibility of KNIME being able to assist us has really put us in a position where we can build on good, solid decision making, and we can get quick answers out of everything that we are wanting to answer. So that's it in a nutshell. Thanks very much for your time.
And thank you, Jonathan, for sharing your inspiring story. Maybe if you'll just allow me to summarize some of the highlights, because I think it's difficult to sort of capture multiple years of growth in just one PowerPoint presentation.
Absolutely.
So it sounds like you were coming from being, in the beginning, you had limited insights, right? You're more of a data curious company, I would say, where the data was a bit unclear, really no dashboards or limited reporting, if any, until you found KNIME, right? And then it sounds like you built 3 ETL models, if I have it correct, started exploring big data, and are now basically building a path toward the cloud, if I got it right so far.
Yeah, 100%.
Okay, and then now you're basically a truly data-driven company. So like that chaotic slide that I showed earlier with all the lines going to different departments. So basically that represents those 13 or so dashboards that you have, the tailored reporting that's going to each department. You've basically fully automated now, and basically you're now planning to double stores every 3 years via KNIME planning. I guess if I could sum it up in one sentence, maybe I would say that you've gone from pen and paper to Internet of Things, basically on one platform, if it makes sense.
Yeah, that's a very, very concise summary. Absolutely.
Okay. Wow, fascinating. Very fascinating stuff, Jonathan. I appreciate you sharing that. I do actually have another question regarding upskilling, but what I think I would do first is bring on Tatiana to start to facilitate the Q&A. Hi, Tatiana. Welcome back.
Thank you. Thank you, Jonathan, for a great presentation. And now we're kicking off the Q&A part. Just once again, let me remind everyone who is listening to this webinar today that you might post your question in the Q&A section on the right-hand side of your screen, and we will do our best to address them today. And actually, the first question goes very much in the same direction as Nick has already mentioned. It's very much about upskilling, onboarding, and training your team. So you mentioned this process was rather quick. Yeah. Could you maybe elaborate a little bit more on how you managed this process and how long in total it took your team to become fully proficient?
Absolutely. I think it's perhaps something that's not quite as believable. It's an easy statement to make, but legitimately we were in a position where I took young, dynamic people with a great attitude. I hire for attitude. Skill set can be built over time, and that flexibility of being able to mold and manipulate and onboard people that have the right attitude can really build onto where you can grow them and how you can grow them. So a reasonable proficiency in Excel is basically what I was looking for. SQL obviously was a bit of a benefit, but putting them onto the KNIME course online, the KNIME Academy course where you go through each phase of the KNIME journey, really is a great tool. I went through all of those videos myself. They are really spectacular. They concise. They in very often times, I'm making notes like, I need to go and explore this. I don't know what that is. And it really puts you on a great data journey. And being able to dedicate time for them not doing any work in that onboarding process meant that they could get through that content relatively quickly, as well as, who Hungry Lion is and those types of training videos that we've got internally. And it was legitimately within weeks they were starting to explore building, their own workflows and starting to process data and ask questions themselves. And within about 2 months of them starting, each person's obviously a bit different, and I give people grace in terms of that onboarding process. It needs to take as long as it takes. Some people are a lot more detail orientated, but it puts them in a position where very quickly they can start building workflows. And within 2 months, I had people contributing actively in our team, and within 6 months, complete proficiency, where I no longer had to look at anything personally. I could run through the workflow. They could explain it at a high level, and the proof is in the pudding. The data has integrity. It's where it needs to be, and they've processed it via the KNIME workflow. So happy days, moving on with life.
Sounds like an amazing journey. It's really, really, really great to hear. And now, when you have the whole team collaborating on a single platform, you talk about the advantages of having all team members on a single platform, and specifically in regards to complementing and sharing the different skill sets that you might have in your team.
Absolutely. So obviously everything being deployed on the KNIME server, so anything that's in production moves onto the server, so everyone works in their own spaces. We also ensure that our local repositories are mapped to our Google Drive, so we don't have to worry about saving information or anything like that. So that ensures that we don't lose any information. We also then put ourselves in a position where we actually move through our workflows with a bit of process logic. There's a lot of notation that needs to take place. I'm a firm believer in being able to hand over something just via a chat, go and check out the workflow that I've just deployed, go and have a look at it. And between the name of the workflow and the notation that we write, basically where the node number would be, that gives a very good indication. You read what the node says, you read what's underneath there, and that ability to collaborate and understand somebody's process logic through the workflow puts you in a great position. You can also see the frequency of those jobs once they've scheduled, and being able to leverage on all the different connectors that KNIME affords us. We're able to leverage off somebody's Python strength or somebody's SQL strength. You can process your data in the tool or the manner that you feel comfortable with. I found myself in the beginning, leveraging heavily off of my Excel abilities. I was an advanced Excel user for many years, and I built a lot of tools in Excel. And I was a firm believer that Excel is the be all and end all. And you then start finding these big data tools like KNIME, and you really realize that the world is tiny in that sphere. And it's such an incredible journey to get to a point where you're using your knowledge that you've got based on something that, from strictly speaking, is not extremely high level. You're able to leverage off of those principles and find a node that does exactly what the equivalent formula would in a tool like Google Sheets or Excel.
Sounds great. We actually have quite a few questions, so we'll really try to do our best to cover them all. And the next question would be, how do you use mostly the KNIME server? Do you create schedules that run automatically or also data apps?
So we haven't moved to a data app space yet. In terms of where our business is, there aren't many users that are in a position to use tools like that yet. You know, we're still getting everybody into a position where they are data proficient. Hospitality is not necessarily a data intensive environment. So, you know, growing the way we've built our team from roughly 60 people at the end of COVID to just over 130 head office employees. But there's a process of onboarding and getting everybody into a position where they understand and adopt data. So not many apps at this stage. We've explored one or two as a solution, but predominantly we schedule our jobs and automate our data pipelines using the server. That all builds into Google's BigQuery, and from there we render via our BI tool.
Nice. There's a very interesting question, which is, how were you able to get the buy-in from top management? How do you handle change management? So I think that's a lot of people.
That's a brilliant question, because it's always a struggle, right? We're often managing upward as much as we are downwardly. KNIME was brilliant for that. There was obviously a bit of hesitancy, you know, how can this tool that you're playing with on your desktop that looks like a crazy jumble of, you know, wire, how does that actually speak to our business solutions? How are you going to build pipelines like that? And I think the one thing that was really eye-opening for me in terms of how easy KNIME is to understand is, I was having a meeting with one of the execs, and he said to me, you know, I want to understand what you've done here just for peace of mind. And I was able to, in one of our conference rooms, check up onto the big screen, my workflow, I maximized everything. I dialed into, you know, the different sections, and I walked him through every single process. I showed him some of the math formulas that I was employing, enriching data using rule engines, you know, column expression nodes to change and manipulate things. And then towards the end of the process, that really developing the structure of your data to make sure that it's scalable, so that you're not having new fields come in. You know, those types of configurations really do make a big difference, so that when you're deploying something, it lasts. It doesn't just fall apart because you didn't have the ability to dynamically configure it the way you want to. And that process for him was very eye-opening. He was very comfortable with what I was doing, and that project launched very quickly, and it was not long after that we got sign-off for the server.
So it's fair to say that you actually do bring peace of mind to your colleagues and executives in the organization.
Absolutely, 100%.
Perfect. What, if any, challenges did you have to overcome with respect to data integrity?
So that's a great question. As I alluded to earlier, we've got internet and power challenges in Southern Africa. So it does mean that data streams do come through in a piecemeal fashion oftentimes. So, you know, we could have as much as 40% of our estate having a connectivity or power disruption throughout any given day, basically. So that puts us into a position where that building off of a window of data collection rather than a single point where on a day we go, we're pulling data for yesterday and that information is going to all be there. We know that that's not the case. So we build on windows, and we do rolling collection periods. And in terms of integrity, super simple. You plug KNIME onto things and you check that, do you have the amount of records that you should? When you're grouping by a specific field or aggregating, do you have those numbers where they should be? And then reconciling, obviously, to other platforms is really simple. So I've used KNIME both to build our pipelines, but then also to reconcile to, the SQL databases that we're connecting to, just by aggregating those through a small little workflow, reconnecting to the information and making sure, from a logical perspective, do we actually tally on the data quantum that we need to.
Sounds good. And there seems to be quite a few questions about the upskilling, not only your team, but generally on a broader organizational level. So the next question I think is also quite interesting. Does your company try to augment the general level of data literacy among managers and employees? Or is that knowledge limited to the data science team?
So, great question as well. Initially, we found ourselves in a position where we needed to upskill people. So I spent a good chunk of my time, because I'd had poor adoption experiences historically, so I knew what it was going to take. And having sessions one-on-one with users where we would go through the information together, I would show them how I navigate a dashboard page. I would have quick, rapid changes to the way we were consuming the data and asking them what their problem statements were. That ability to quickly change and dynamically move through the processes while like doing a hand-holding session and doing numerous hand-holding sessions got to a point where people were really understanding their information a lot better. And it wasn't just a question of we built something that really looks amazing and my team goes, yeah, this is a great solution, it's really clever. Rather than that, you have something that's perhaps not as technical or not as elegant a solution, but really answers somebody's business question. And the ability to do that and harness what their problems are and actually spending the time understanding what that end user's goal is for their data, that puts you into a position of power. You really get their buy-in.
It's a really, really nice story. So thanks for sharing. I will take a few more questions just to make sure that we're still on time. In what way have you moved away from manual capturing of product/raw food temperatures? That's related to your latest part of the presentation.
Yeah. So in the last 4 years, we've actually adopted 2 separate tools. We realized, firstly, the first solution that we went with was a little bit limited. And that's part of our data journey. You realize very quickly that not everybody's doing what we're doing. Not everybody's challenging suppliers. They're not putting them in a position where they're hammering APIs the way we do, where you're querying SQL DBs the way we do. So that journey is a learning for not just ourselves, but definitely for our service providers and our vendors. And part of that process for us digitizing those results that we were wanting to see was finding a partner. They had a solution. We had already tied into them with something else in terms of the way we were capturing some information. And we explored using them as a solution. That landed up not necessarily being a great fit. So we decided to onboard another data management team. And that tool that we plugged into has definitely allowed us to have the freedom. Again, it's like KNIME. We want to put the power in our own hands. We are able to build our own checklists, manage those processes, and deploy those surveys, questions, processes, checklists through to our teams. And then we plug onto that data and process it as needed. So I'm being a bit cryptic, I suppose, but basically there are a lot of platforms that you can use to go and plug into your data. We've chosen, I believe the company's name is Wooker. They're an Indian-based business, and with big data, you leverage with the internet being able to deal with partners from all over the world. So yeah, that's how we're collecting that information at the moment.
That's great. All right. Nick, you might have some questions to share as well.
Yeah. Absolutely. I'm just, from my perspective, Jonathan, I'm just curious, do you have any further plans to adopt data science across the organization? And if so, do you plan to use KNIME to do that?
Yeah, absolutely. So we are now embarking on our machine learning journey. We have hired a young man who is really well positioned to help us start building ensemble models for forecasting, for both procurement and for sales. And we're wanting to get a lot more technical with the way we manage our stores. With growing to 300 stores, we obviously have a drive for simplification. We want to be able to onboard a manager and have them, running a store independently within weeks of starting. And that comes with really reducing clutter, reducing operational processes that are perhaps redundant or not quite necessary. And part of that journey is putting us into a position where, we can actually get the information and get the structure of the business as simple as possible so that we can gain information at scale, which is definitely required for machine learning. And we can then use KNIME to explore that information, get a real good grip of what's happening, start building some basic models. It plugs into a lot of the very fundamental machine learning models that are out there. There are nodes for all of that. Pre-processing data is really easy. So we are using KNIME for that. In terms of long-term plans, we'll more than likely deploy things in GCP. And yeah, definitely KNIME is going to be critical in our growth and our machine learning exploration path.
Great. Well, it's exciting to hear you're already planning to adapt a bit more and even take on some machine learning aspects as well. So that's very cool.
Yeah, we do that stuff currently externally. So we've got external businesses that forecast sales and stuff. But again, having that ability to, understand the nuances of your data like nobody else can, because, we work here. This is our information, it's our IP. We definitely have a good understanding of how to build those models successfully.
And maybe as just a quick follow-up, since you're talking about expanding and maybe doing some upskilling across the company, I know you mentioned about 2 months and 6 months seem to be like the golden zone for getting employees upskilled. Could you maybe just elaborate a little bit, like what are the goals or milestones or benchmarks for each of those 2 months and 6 months? Like what do you like to see before your team feels productive with KNIME?
So the great thing about being on a journey where nothing's established is there's no KPIs. Nobody's asking you, and I'm extremely blessed. I've got an exec team that really, we've got a lot of freedom in the way we work. They've got a lot of trust in us, and they allow us to really make decisions on our own. And being able to, just establish which way I want to go on a given day is really great. And it has been, as I said, it's definitely a blessing. But those timeframes landed up not coming from anywhere. I wasn't anticipating that would be what it takes. I've just hired a number of people now, and that lands up being roughly the sweet spot. Within 4 weeks, they're contributing using KNIME. They're plugging into information. You give them a little bit of orientation in terms of what the landscape looks like. They onboard through all the training videos, and it normally takes about that much. So I hire smart people. They are really rock stars. They definitely know what they're doing in terms of being able to research and self-help. And I don't need to micromanage anybody. It's really a great way to do business and to get people proficient.
All right, thanks for that, Jonathan. Tatiana, perhaps are there any more questions from the audience that we could help address?
There are indeed. There's a question. I couldn't get what you mean by telling management by exception, and how did you implement it at Hungry Lion.
Okay. So what that means is, let's say you've got a restaurant that is cooking chicken, and all the temperatures that you're getting from your IoT devices are within a normal acceptable range. And let's say the threshold for chicken coming out of the freezer needs to stay below 4 degrees Celsius. That amount of temperature readings that you're getting through come in normally. As soon as you see a spike beyond that threshold, we'd consider that as an exception. So when that temperature gets raised above 4 degrees Celsius, that's a problem. And what we're able to do now is, having plugged into these IoT devices, processing via KNIME, we're able to interact with a digital self-management tool that we've built at Hungry Lion. And an application will send a message to a store manager. There's a process workflow where it will go, hang on, have you noticed there's a problem in your back office area where you thaw your chicken? We've noticed some of the crates are sitting above 5 degrees Celsius. Is somebody busy processing there? And that, and sitting on top of our data without any human intervention allows us to be in a real position of strength. We are able to manage exceptions rather than sit there and look at, heaps and heaps of data. And that's it.
All right, so we have about 4 minutes left, and we have a number of questions that are still there. So maybe we can address them somehow differently, because I think we have about 3 minutes left. So I think that would be a good time to start the wrap up, and we still allow some time to, say the final words, if that's okay. And then we will see how we can address the remaining questions outside of the webinar today. All right, Nick, then back to you.
All right, then. Well, thank you so much, Jonathan, for sharing that insightful story. I guess that's all the time we have for today. So thank you again, everyone, for joining us and for asking your questions. All questions will be posted to the KNIME forum. So if you didn't get the answer, you can find it there. Please stay in touch and join us at our next webinar. We have our QR code up on the screen now, which will bring you to our company website. And finally, we are open source, so feel free to download our KNIME Analytics platform today and get started playing with data. And until next time.
Thank you very much.